Hi, I'm your host, Dave Kemp, and this is Future Ear Radio. Each episode, we're breaking down one new thing, one cool new finding that's happening in the world of hearables, the world of voice technology. How are these worlds starting to intersect? How are these worlds starting to collide? What cool things are going to come from this intersection of technology? Without further ado, let's get on with the show. Okay, so we're joined here today by Paul Michaelenko. Paul, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Hey man, glad to be here. I am a product designer who became a founder in the podcast and audio voice space because I became obsessed with the idea of listening to podcasts in a way that's social and that's voice enabled, where I believe that we should be able to, consume audio content and then also be able to, share it and talk about it with our friends all in one interface. And that's what I'm, been driven and obsessed with.
Very cool. So Paul is the founder of the Listen app. So the reason I wanted to bring him on today, this has been something that I've been thinking a lot about, is like, what does, I've been blogging a lot, I've been podcasting a lot about this new sort of shift of media to our ears. It's the Daniel Ek notion. Are our eyes really worth 10 times more than our ears? And this just massive explosion of podcasting and ambient media. And so for me, the way I look at it is there's going to surely be social medias, and platforms that will spring up around this. And so I've been on the lookout for this, discovered Paul, and I started to talk to him. I've gotten a chance to play around with his app, and it's really sort of a premonition, because I think you realize when you do sort of see some of the stuff that's being built on the forefront of this, it's really, really exciting. It feels like a glimpse into the future. So Paul, tell us a little bit about the Listen app and what the vision is with this thing.
All right. I'll do my best because the vision is really ambitious. I'll be honest. It's probably one of the most ambitious things I've ever done in my life. Partly because I think this, like what we're trying to do, intersects a lot with kind of who I am. My background's in music and vocal performance. And then I went into like product design and I just love building digital experiences that, make you smile, that make you feel like this is magic. Wow, this is so much fun. This is so cool. So, and I love like community and everything that has to do with that. So here it's kind of the convergence of all these things that I'm, quite obsessed with. So about 2.5 years ago, I started my own podcast. It was on musical literacy, kind of like musical appreciation for everyone, which, I enjoyed a lot. And at that point I became obsessed with thinking about how do we move the audio experience forward. And I became obsessed with the medium of podcasting and audio in general. I just think all of your listeners probably have thought about, not only the utility, but how it unlocks the imagination and just how nice it is. But like, if you think about it from a social perspective, we have like, Instagram where we share images, and that kind of becomes a place where essentially it's like a lifestyle sharing platform where you share like, this is how cool I am, this is how cool my car is, and how good looking I am. It's like, it's one of those platforms of where it has wonderful things as well. But and then like Facebook becomes, kind of a place where you stay connected with, old friends and family, where it's just like life updates platform, if you will. Then you have Twitter, which I would say is very closely related to blogs. And I think Twitter is kind of the short, informal version of blogging. So, instead of 10,000 characters, it's 140. You're posting your, just kind of general pithy thoughts and statements, which also has tons of value, because sometimes you just don't want to read a lot. You don't want to write a lot. It's very useful. And what we're doing is kind of like what Twitter is to blogs. The Listen app is to podcasting. I've been thinking a ton about like, what are the core problems in the industry that need to be solved? And if you talk to most people, even in the industry, they'll say, well, discovery is broken, or like monetization is broken, or, something along those lines. And those are like generic terms that get thrown around. They're very broad, and they don't actually point to like, why are they still broken? The industry is 15 years old. Like, why? It's not like people haven't tried to solve these things. There's been so many attempts, like, but what are the core challenges that make it difficult? And in my mind, it breaks down to three issues. First, the audio doesn't interface with social media. That's why you never have audio clips going viral.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to take an audio clip and post it on Facebook or YouTube or anywhere else, the videos are always going to outperform because it's a screen interface. So
Mm-hmm.
you're at a competitive disadvantage. There's no native social network for sharing audio and discussing it.
Yes.
And you can't just take like interfaces from screens and stick them into an audio environment and expect them to work. In podcasting, we have 3 apps that try that. There's Breaker, Castbox, and the Himalaya app. They have like little chats in their app. Actually, there's more than that. Those were the 3
Right.
first ones. And if you look at the experiences, people aren't really interacting, and it's probably not what the original product designers thought would happen. And there's reasons for that. It's a different interface. When you're listening to audio, your phone is off. Like if you're looking at an image on Instagram, there's a little thing that says, reply to, so-and-so, right on every single thing. If you're on Twitter, the reply and the dialogue and the discussions, they're all right there. In audio, your phone screen is off. You have to like open the app. There's no prompts to go there. And then you have to start typing, but you're probably walking or you're like working out or you're multitasking anyway. So the friction just makes it too difficult for it to be meaningful. So I don't see like, and then the other thing is like liking, content that works for user generated content, but the
Mm-hmm.
content consumed in podcasting right now is mostly publisher content. So then you have that issue as well. So I don't see that traditional thing working. And I'm sorry, the traditional interface working in audio. And so that's like one big issue. Then the other one is that audio doesn't interface with traditional transactional experiences. So, like on Facebook, if you want to sell something, you could just include a link like subscribe or buy or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that with audio. Like if you wanted to sell something right now, there's no like click on this link.
Right. There's no swipe up.
Yeah, there's no swipe up. In the best case, you would say it's in my show notes,
Mm-hmm.
but still the interface that your listeners are on is audio. They have to now find their phone, unlock it, open your app, find the show notes, click on it, go to a completely, third-party experience of where they're going to start interacting. They're shifting gears from this audio experience now to a screen-based, and they can't be like listening to you and doing that at the same time. It just, it doesn't work very well. And especially for podcasters who want to monetize, there's no like in-app experiences. And finally, the last one is a little bit different. It has to do with, how audio, how would I even describe this best? In podcasting, specifically, I would say, podcasting doesn't discriminate between publisher content and independent creators.
Mm-hmm.
And independent creators and publishers have very different business models and goals in mind and how they want
Yes.
to monetize. And it would be like, lumping together HBO and, YouTube
Mm-hmm.
into one mosh posh of content and trying to serve everybody. It's just, it's not going to work. So I think, those 3 things in my mind is part of the systemic reasons why it's hard to innovate in the space. And I think they also outline what we're trying to solve.
So before we kind of go into the Listen app, you've covered a lot of ground there and a couple things I want to touch on there. First of all, it's like 15 years old, but it is still a really young medium. And I think like I'm relating it back to sort of the way that the text web evolved. And so how did we get to the point to where you can be on Instagram, you can swipe up and you can relatively easily buy things through Instagram? Well, it was a progression, right? Like you had to go through the phase where people had to even become comfortable with buying things online. You go back to the late 90s, the early 2000s, people were very, very hesitant to even put their credit card information online. And obviously you
Mm-hmm.
overcome that. Then you have the mobile web, revolution, and you have just like the way that which these apps even came to be. And so it takes so much time to even get to the point to where, that's like now it's just a routine thing. Swipe up, subscribe to this, buy this. So that,
Yeah.
that merch side is really frictionless. But to your point, there's so much opportunity, not only with the merchandising, but also with the sharing aspect of this. Like, this is exactly why we met, basically, was this is what I've been looking for. Is it's not the same thing as just saying, like, when Facebook created their mobile app the first time around and they just tried to port their entire website onto the app. It was
Mm-hmm.
a mess. It was an absolute
Mm-hmm.
nightmare. And so obviously they had to design a native mobile app from the ground up. I think the same thing's going to have to be done here, where we're having to rethink what it means to, just to your point, in this like very audio centric, audio native interface. What does a like look like in that? What does
Yeah.
me responding to a message, what does engagement look like? And I think that maybe it's something that, when you kind of remove the screen from the equation, is it something that's more akin to sharing it like you would if you were in person with somebody? Like, the point that I've made before is that, it's crazy to me that nobody has seemingly captured the fact that, at least for me personally, the way that I discover 90% of the podcasts that I listen to are through recommendations, like word of mouth through my friends
Mm-hmm.
or people
Mm-hmm.
that I hold in high regard on Twitter. And so if
Mm-hmm.
I see them recommending something, but that's like a clunky process in and of itself. Like, they have to send me the link, then I have to, there's not really that good of a way to save it. What would be so much better is if there was something that was truly designed from the ground up, to where it's like, here's your recommended listens and here are clips that you can listen to, kind of like a stream of the different clips. And it's like, okay, I want to listen to that full episode there. So you can kind of see, like, I think how, uh, and I would love to hear, because you're actually building all this, but that's how my mind is working with all this, is to say, I don't think that I think part of the reason that we've struggled up until now is that, we are in sort of the black and white phase of this medium. It's still really, really young. We're going
Mm-hmm.
to have iterative steps toward getting to, I think, more natural solutions to these things. But B, I really think that the root of a lot of the issue is that we're not thinking about these solutions natively to the actual interface and the
Mm-hmm.
experience.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And if we're like, for it to mature, it could stay young for longer. Like
Yep.
somebody has to solve the problems that will let it mature, and nobody knows exactly how it'll mature. We just know of the current problems that exist, and one of the other things that's related to this that's very difficult is like the podcast ecosystem. I think like when we're talking about voice first anything, I think the podcast ecosystem is a very important component of all this, because that's where all the user attention is right now in
Exactly.
audio. That's where people are living. So trying to create like audio experiences completely separate of that, you're competing with, that's where all the attention is,
I
so it's like, that's why we're starting there, because I think that's where the utility is. Like long term, yes, we want a completely like hands free environment where people can listen and have this like social audio network. It's going to take time to get there. I was telling you before we started this call, it's kind of like driverless cars. You don't just like jump from manual cars as is into pure
know.
driverless technology. Like
Right.
it's too
It's
fast for
iterative.
everybody. Yeah, and not only do we need the technology, the people need to get used to the idea and the experience of it. So right
Totally.
now, what do we have? We have these like like cruise control that's like out of this world, where it's like keeping you in the lanes, it's like switching lanes for you, it's
Mhm.
so, and that's kind of the transition. And so that's what we're doing with our app, where from what I know, this is the first like social audio podcast app that's voice first. So nobody is doing any commenting via typing. Everything's by recording your voice. And our MVP is, we don't have any voice enabled commands yet built into it, so you're still like holding a button. But if you have your AirPods, then you don't even need to bring your phone up to your mouth. And eventually, of course, those will be driven by voice commands.
Mhm.
But yeah, absolutely. I think we have to start moving towards integrating some of the big issues, like the social um, networking experience and audio. Like audio will never interface with traditional social media, so you have to create a new environment for it. And it's hard because podcasting is a very open ecosystem, and it's very much resistant to any kind of integration into a platform.
Mhm.
And I can sympathize with that a lot, because once you get big overlords like Facebook controlling the entire ecosystem, then it doesn't always become good for the users. And so like here, I think that's why it's good that we have, a large player like Apple in the space. We have Spotify, and what we're doing is different from them. We're focusing on the social networking side, which I'm sure they won't be, building, because that's just completely out of their purview. And it's really for people who listen a lot, and who are people who want to talk about what they're listening to and what they want to share it. Like, it's not going to be a product that's for everybody. If you just listen to one episode a month, then it probably, is not going to be ideal for you.
But like you made mention earlier about this idea of community building. And I think that's a really, really interesting take on this, because I know that, like, I would say the vast majority of people, they listen to, I always think about these things in inverted pyramids, right? So up at the top, the most broad level, you have people that are listening to Joe Rogan Experience. They're listening to, Barstool, Part of My Take.
Mm-hmm.
They're listening to these like really high listened, giant audiences. But I think that as you sort of go down the funnel and it becomes more and more niche and personalized, that's where I think I think a lot of people listen to those. Like, I know for me, I listen to a lot of voice specific podcasts. I listen to
Yeah.
podcasts that are related to my industry. I listen to podcasts that are related to my sports teams, the things that, like, I personally care a lot about.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where you really have this community opportunity, because, there's millions of Part of My Take fans out there. Like, we're not all going to be able to even cut through the noise and communicate with each other, but there's only, a couple hundred Future Ear, like my podcast, listeners. But what would be really cool is if you had that community element to it, to where people can gather around in a sense and talk about what they liked and share it. And again,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you
Mm-hmm.
can do these things today. Like, I could tweet these things. I'd be like, hey, check this out. But it's not native to the whole
Yeah.
format. Like, it would be
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
cool if this was all done in the same medium, if it was all spoken word, if it was all done audio natively.
That's absolutely the goal. And, because like when you tweet something out there, you'll have a bunch of followers on Twitter or Facebook who don't necessarily care for podcasts. And so
Mm-hmm.
it just kind of flies over them, and, you don't get the kind of engagement and responses that you'd hope, where, this is the place the place we're building is like for people who do care about podcasting. So you can curate them even more, kind of specifically to, first you have kind of just your friends in general that,
Mm-hmm.
you follow with your profile. But then when you subscribe to a show, you can enter into a community of other listeners. And
I love that.
this is what's really interesting. And what we're going to be doing with our app is, what I said earlier about the third problem is the discrimination between publisher and independent creator. That's what we're going to be doing. Like, if you look at, ginormous, podcast shows, they don't necessarily want to build like these community groups that like
Mm-hmm.
the creators are responding to their listeners. Like,
Right.
they just want to create great content and have millions of people listen, and they will probably always prefer an ad model that just works well for them because they have such
The
broad
scale.
reach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but independent creators, like, you don't have the scale, but what you do have is a very fascinating niche topic that
Yes.
is interesting to a very specific group of people who will even pay you monthly to support, the content and to be a part of this exclusive community. And there are so many creators out there who would, who would take advantage of this. So we're kind of, what we're doing is like taking the idea of like online courses,
Mm-hmm.
but turning it into a community audio experience where people can create these communities on our app. We've been prototyping the experience, and I'm calling it group casts. I don't know if I'm going to stick with the name, but that's kind of what I came up with for now, because it's kind of a new concept. And so
Yeah.
you can create a group, which is like a group cast, and then invite people to it. And you can make it free, or you can make it monetized. It can be either your own show, or you can, curate a list of episodes and then just listen to them with friends. It has a very broad application.
I mean, that's really, really interesting to me, because I think, again, I had a conversation with a guest of mine, Brett Bivens, back on episode 14, and we talked about the whole Ringer acquisition from
Mm-hmm.
Spotify. And I said that, one of the things that we talked about on there was that, I kind of think that part of what they're buying is, yeah, they're buying the Ringer but they're also buying the talent. And I think what that translates into is like, I think people are going to be subscribing not just to like whatever Bill Simmons is producing, but they want to like follow and they want him to aggregate news and information for them. And I think like you apply this on a broad scale. Yeah, you're going to have like the influential people like a Bill Simmons, but I think this would trickle down to like, I think it's a really interesting way that you can not only build communities, but also help to introduce people to new things and create community around the fact that, it's almost like you're DJing, you're kind of in a group
Yeah.
and you're
Yeah.
DJing and you're saying like, rather than like, check out this song, I got this new cool band. It's like, check out this podcast, check out this really interesting conversation I had.
Yeah.
And then you're
Yeah.
sitting, it's like a fireside. You're like sitting around, you're like, that was great. Like, this is what I liked about it, And so
Yeah.
I think that's a
Yeah.
really interesting take on this whole thing.
Yeah. And I think we can have so much fun with this because, okay, like social podcasting in a collaborative effort hasn't existed. Like you start a podcast, it's just kind of one man show. But imagine you create a group cast and then you invite participants to
Mm-hmm.
create different episodes. So now
Yeah.
like within the group, you can all be participating in creating content for everybody else to consume and discuss. Okay, that's one, that like a whole new array of possibilities now. And then if you're like the podcast brunch club, which is this global community, right? They all they do is they curate episodes and then listen to them and then get together and discuss them. So like right now they have a thing on the coronavirus where they've curated all the different podcasts out there that have created content on the coronavirus, which is like really cool. It's an awesome list, right?
Yeah.
And then they invite a group of people to listen to it and then they get together and talk about it. So like all that you could do in the app,
Yeah.
where you don't have to go to some other platform or somewhere else, and you can curate all that content. And of course, if you have your own show, it's even more valuable.
Well, I think what's cool about this though is, I think that you're basically creating a third, sort of like a third character, if you will. Like, so currently you have a publisher and you have a listener. And I
Mm-hmm.
think like one of the reasons that makes Twitter so compelling is that there's this third type of person, which is an aggregator. It's a curator. And
Mm-hmm.
it's the person that is, they're not necessarily the one that's putting together the content, and they're not even the one that's necessarily consuming the content, but they're like the DJ. They're the one that's sharing everything. And they're like,
Yeah.
this is the best of the
Yeah.
best of the
Yeah.
best.
Yeah.
And so you create this ability to have aggregators. And then from there, you create like the book club effect where, you're
Yeah.
all getting
Yeah.
together and you're talking about it. So again, like this is just, a lot of this is even new to me. And we've been talking for about 20, 25 minutes, but it's like, I feel like we're just scratching the surface with what's possible here, because again, when you think about this and it's like most, atomic principles,
Mm-hmm.
first
Mm-hmm.
principles, and you think about what you're actually doing here, you're thinking about this thing from the ground up. It's truly
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
what does this native audio app look like that
Yeah.
is built around sharing, audio, whether it be spoken word audio that's pre-produced, or it's commenting and sharing and just contributing together, as you kind of learn together. I think that's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, man. And that, I think what you said from first principles, that's very much the case, because we've been just trying to step back and just imagine a world where nothing existed. There's like no if we were designing this just as product designers from the ground, like we just like would imagine an ideal world. What should it look like? And like we've gone through some really fun exercises. You want me to share one with you about
Sure,
like
go right ahead.
and this might be interesting for your listeners as well when it comes to like product design in voice and audio, right? So I was thinking about like forums, right? And like groups in audio, and traditionally what you have, you have like this empty forum that people just can comment on, which we've incorporated that as well to an extent, but we've tweaked it. And the reason we tweaked it, because I was imagining a physical analogy to the digital environment. So if you imagine a forum, I imagine it to be like an empty room, and now like say a group of people listen to some content or something, and then like one person walks into the room and they say something, right? They don't
Mhm.
know who's going to listen to them, if anybody's
Yeah.
going to hear it.
All right.
It's just like this awkward, like, I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to put it out there, right? And so being the first person to comment is always weird. right? Because
Yep.
you're like,
Yeah,
is
totally.
anyone here? Hello.
Is anybody listening?
Here's some
Yes.
echo, some
Right.
crickets in the background. And then like somebody else walks into the room and they listen to this person's comment, right? And they're not, sometimes they respond, but most of the time they just kind of say their own thing. And it's like, and so they're like standing next to each other, not even necessarily having a dialogue, just like, here's my thing, you know?
Yes. Yes. I know exactly where you're going with
And
it.
then like somebody else walks in, and then eventually like people start responding. If we like interacted like that in real life, that would be really weird. Like that's not
Yeah,
how we want
for
to,
sure.
right? And so what we want is one-on-one interactions with people that have similar interests to us, right?
Hmm.
And so we were trying to map out in the app, like how do we curate that? And especially when it comes to voice, um, time is the most limited, time is what's difficult because audio takes longer than text.
Hmm.
And so like that's a constraint, and we have to think about that very, like, yes, you get a lot of benefits out of audio, but that's a serious constraint. So
Hmm.
we can't expect people to just go through a bunch of comments via
Right.
audio. It's going to take an hour, and so how do you drive then the engagement and the dialogue and all of that? So we were doing two things to come around that. First of all, we transcribe everything, so if you want to skim, you can skim. But
Yes.
second, what we do is we have an algorithm that goes in, and anytime you leave a comment on an episode, we find other people who also listen to that episode who have similar interests as you do based on your listening history. And we recommend your comment to that other person. So
Mhm.
that we kind of do this like matchmaking, like, hey, you should go talk to so and so. So we
Yeah.
kind of like walk you into a room and like, hey, this person just said something that I think you'll find interesting. Hey, meet Joe, meet Bob,
Yeah.
take it away
No,
from
that's
here,
a
kind of a
really,
thing.
I like the way that you sort of illustrated that in my mind, because I get where you're coming from with that, with the idea of a forum and like how that's so disconnected to the way that we actually communicate in real life. Like that truly is such an online behavior.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting that you're sort of, again, it's the first principles where you're kind of attacking this thing as if you were attacking it like, this isn't how we communicate. This is how
Yeah.
we've become accustomed
Yeah.
to communicating, but
Yeah.
and I love that you're kind of like going after that and you're actually trying to approach that challenge with that first principle in mind. So very, very
For
cool.
sure.
So Paul, why don't you share with everybody where we can learn more about the Listen app, like what the timeline is here for when you guys plan to
Yeah.
roll this thing out, like widespread? Because I think a lot of people listening are going to be really excited about the prospect of what you're building.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I have a question for you. When approximately do you expect this episode to air?
This will probably air early March.
Early March. Okay. So by early March, we are in the App Store. Go find us. Go to the App Store, search for Listen App, and it's this. I'm sure you won't miss it. There's no other Listen app. So yeah, download the app. Please leave us a review. It'll help us get discovered, of course. But yeah, you'll go into it. You'll find it to be a full featured player that's very well designed. We use some of the best world class designers out there. So and then once you get into the interface, then you can create an account. You need to create an account, of course, to participate in the social
Hmm.
dynamics. Once you do that, then you'll be able to find people and start interacting. And it's so much fun. Like everybody
Yeah.
who uses it for the first time, they're like, "Oh wow, I just recorded my voice. Oh my goodness, there's all the text. It's like
Yep.
instant, So it's
I'm
fresh.
I'm
I
definitely
think
having
it's
some fun
sensational.
playing around with the beta version. So I'm excited because by the time this airs, everybody will be able to download the full app. And yeah,
Yeah,
I'll definitely be sharing out the link and everything, when this thing does go out. So we're looking forward to it. So Paul, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for everybody who tuned in here to the end, and we will chat with you next time. Cheers.
thank you. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Future Ear Radio. For more content like this, just head over to futureear.co, where you can read all the articles that I've been writing these past few years on the worlds of voice technology and hearables and how the two are beginning to intersect. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll chat with you next time.